Stop that. Anyway, this is the Dynasty Fantasy Football Central podcast. I am Michael Moore. He is Jonathan Scott. Say hello, Jonathan.
Hey, everyone.
There you go. Oh, no. Intruder.
Yeah, that's all right.
Anyway, so this is episode 8. This is the conclusion of our look at each division and the new Dynasty faces in it. As always, you can check us out on dynastyfantasyfootballcentral.com, or you can tweet us at dynasty_FFC. Today, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at the AFC East. And per our usual, we will be going from first, or rather worst to first, and your Buffalo Bills. So, Jonathan, who do we have up first?
Again, we don't pull any punches here. We're going straight to the meat. We're going to Sammy Watkins.
There you go. There you go.
For once, we have someone for once where we really shouldn't spend a lot of time on him. That's just because everyone agrees he's a badass and he's awesome. And draft him if you can. Even if somebody's already drafted him, try to redraft him and see what happens. Like, he's apparently just going to be great. And there's no evidence of any kind that I can find in tape or in talking to people or anything that suggests otherwise. So, hey, he should go 1-1 overall in your league. Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. I don't think people should try to get too cute with it. I mean,
No.
Look, we've all had thoughts of doing something really crazy, thinking, no, I know something that no one else does, but no, please don't do that.
Don't be that guy.
Yeah, he's your 1-1. And just real quick, I mean, amazing athleticism. His yards after the catch ability, that's what I think for me is really special too, which, what that means is he can catch balls from a short range, intermediate range, whatever. So it's not like, hey, the deep ball is his one threat. I mean, he can do anything. So
Yep.
Now from a dynasty perspective, and this is where it gets a little interesting, obviously his ultimate value is going to be determined by the quarterback play. And right now, with E.J. Manuel there, I'm not an E.J. Manuel fan, personally. I wasn't last year. I think he was the top quarterback prospect in a very weak class, and I don't think that changes anything this year. And I'm scared that Watkins' value is going to be hindered by Manuel, at least for this year. I mean, look, it's a win-win for Watkins, right? So if Manuel progresses and ends up being pretty good, great. He's going to take advantage. If he completely tanks it this year, meaning Manuel, they're probably going to go quarterback soon, okay, to replace that. So, yeah, so with Watkins, yeah, and again, I think we've literally in the short time we talked about him covered what we needed to cover. He's your top guy.
Agreed.
So, who do we got next?
Bryce Brown. The reason I'm going straight to his name is, again, I don't know what to make of this guy. I'm a Tennessee fan. I watched him play for a year. He was awesome, and then he just flamed out. Then he came to the league, and for 4 games was awesome, and then flamed out. I don't know, man. I think it's, again, going to be a situation where, hey, he's kind of awesome, but he's probably going to flame out because that's his thing. I wish he had some other thing besides that, but that's just it. So, but he's incredibly talented. He's going to spell Fred Jackson more than people think. He's going to be very good for that team in certain situations. So,
well, yeah. So for me, it's all about the situation, right? I think he's got a very, very good situation. They traded a 4th-round pick for him, which, given it's not like it's a 1st or 2nd-round pick, it's certainly not a Trent Richardson pick, but it's also something that is not cheap. It's not a conditional 7th rounder, right? So he's behind C.J. Spiller. He's behind Fred Jackson. Fred Jackson, mind you, the only, I think, 33-year-old running back in the entire league. So he can't last much longer, if at all, right? So that's point one. Point two is I think, the coaching staff over the years there has done a complete disservice to C.J. Spiller. I think we can all agree with that. C.J. Spiller, from a fantasy perspective, should be a lot further along than he is, and he's not. So what that means is, though, he's entering a free agent year where, look, this is it. If he turns in a good season, they'll probably re-sign him, and it's all good. But if he has another season like he's had, that's not to say that he's going to be gone and Fred Jackson are going to be gone next year, and Bryce Brown is it. So I think Brown is a guy that has a lot of upside, and probably another one of those guys like we talked about on the prior episode, like Hawkins, where there's not going to be many teams in your dynasty leagues that have him simply because there wasn't a place for him and people didn't think to keep him. So I think there's some potential there. I think you can do a lot worse than him as far as some guy you either stash on your taxi squad or just have on a deep roster.
Totally fair. And there is high upside, but there's also incredibly high downside there too. The Spiller thing's interesting to me. He kind of reminds me, not in style necessarily, but sort of in crossroads and reputation of a Reggie Bush when Reggie Bush got drafted. Like, we all thought he was going to be the next big thing as a running back. A few years in, he did some nice things, but kind of got nicked up a little bit. Wasn't exactly the workhorse we all thought he would be. And now it's a situation where he's coming up to be a free agent, and you kind of wonder, is the team going to do what he's going to want? Do what?
You kind of wonder what happened.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of like, well, I mean, everything is there. Why is it?
And remember, they had Marshawn Lynch when they drafted him. They traded Marshawn Lynch for C.J. Spiller, which, if you ask anyone now, it's like, oh, well, that was dumb. But back then, that was the conventional wisdom was, no, you got to trade away Lynch. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And, again, that's another. It's a small reason, but it's another small reason why there might be some doubt with Watkins, but not enough to make you not draft him.
Yeah, don't outsmart yourself here.
Right. All right, who do we got next?
Well, Mike Williams, man. Until they announced that Robert Woods was going to play in the slot and he's going to get a lot of the underneath stuff, Mike Williams is an interesting guy to me because I thought they could transition him to that a little bit. I guess they're going to put him outside. I guess him being stabbed wasn't a big deal. I don't know what his role is here, man. It's interesting. Like, he's not a deep threat. So I guess that means Sammy Watkins is your deep threat. But you have a quarterback who's not good at throwing the ball deep anyway. The Buffalo offense, I'll be honest, kind of confuses the shit out of me. Like, I'll be flat honest. I don't know what the entire goal there is.
Well, I think it's pretty much, look, we're putting all of our eggs in the E.J. Manuel basket, and we need to make sure it works. So let's just get. Oh, it is. I mean, look, if you think about it, they've traded for Bryce Brown, they traded for Mike Williams, they traded for Sammy Watkins. That's a lot of trades for guys. Where, I mean, it's like the guy in your dynasty league that just never has draft picks because he's always trading them for like veterans, right? Yeah. So I'm just really apprehensive that Buffalo if that offense is gonna be able to run with E.J. Manuel. I don't see it. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, for Mike Williams people, if you're looking at redrafting him in a league, he's a 4th or 5th receiver at best. I mean, Christ, he might be the 4th receiver on his own team behind Marquise Goodwin, for being honest. So, I mean, he's not draftable to me. If he's there in like an 18 or 20 round draft at the end and you need to fill spots, okay. But I don't really see a whole lot of return here from him at all because you're talking about an offense that even if it does get going, I don't think is going to be that dynamic. And they have people ahead of him that are just, no matter who you talk to, are better than he is. So,
yeah, no, I think we're all in agreement on that. So, yeah. I think that covers Buffalo. Who do we have next?
The shit show known as the Miami Dolphins. But this organization is just so despicable across the board. I'm sorry, Dolphin fans. You haven't had a good day. It's the Friday LeBron left, by the way, so if this launches about a week later, it's been a bad day for Miami in general. All nine of you Heat fans, by the way, I'm sorry. It'll get better. It gets better. But, yeah, so we'll start with the Dolphins. Well, I think they did make a good move in picking up Noshawn Moreno, actually. He had a career year, and I get the Peyton Manning bump. I really do. But I'm not really sold on the whole Lamar Miller thing. I don't know that he's a guy. And Noshawn Moreno has shown that he can do all the things you expect out of a running back competently, and he's someone you can depend on, especially in pass pro, which, by the way, your quarterback just got the shit knocked out of him 70-something times this year. So I think he can actually be a favorite of that quarterback and that offense pretty quickly. I see a lot of upside here if he happens to be available in drafting leagues, which I doubt he is. But if he is, he's someone I would look at as, up top case scenario. Lamar Miller is the undoubted number 2. Noshawn is undoubtedly number 1. I think you can see 1,000-yard total return here for a year, and a pretty good role for him in this offense.
Well, okay, so let's play this game. It's trading season in a lot of dynasty leagues. So, what round pick would you give up for Noshawn Moreno right now? And you're conservative. I think we need to let people know you are a conservative trader by all means. So
I am. There's no way around that, and it's a reputation.
And so let's assume 1 pick per round, not like, hey, we're assuming you drafted everyone for 8 first-round picks or some shit like that.
Yeah. I would look at like a 4th or 5th rounder for him in this year's draft.
Wow. Really? That seems high to me, man.
It could be. There's a bit of risk there, but listen. That probably speaks more to the idea that I think Lamar Miller kind of sucks than it does. Noshawn Moreno is awesome.
Well, and to your okay. So let's cover that part. I'm with you. I don't think Lamar Miller is anything special either. I mean, he barely beat out Daniel Thomas last year for that job. So, it's just, the whole offense is kind of sad, quite honestly.
But I mean,
I think Tannehill could have been good and could have been decent. Here's the problem. Well, here's the problem. That offensive line is horrible.
Yeah.
And it's all new. It's literally going to have 5 new starters on that line. Or no, I think Pouncey might be back. But even then, they've got 4 new starters besides him. So, yeah, it's just going to be scary. So, but to your point, could Moreno be a guy that, Tannehill checks down to a lot? Yeah, probably. So if you're in a PPR league, hey, he might have some value there.
Look, man, he averaged 4.3 yards a carry. That's not awful. He had 1,040 yards last year running, and he had 60 catches last year. That's kind of insane. Like, that's a huge number for a running back. And I get there's, again, Peyton Manning bump. I get it. But even assuming there is like a 20% bump in numbers for playing for Peyton Manning, you're still talking about a guy that's going to get 850 yards rushing, about 30 to 40 catches, and about 400 yards receiving. That's 1,200 yards on the year. And 40 catches, man, that's not bad. That's a running back 2 or 3 in some leagues.
Sure, I just think that's extremely optimistic. But that's, we're allowed to do that. We can disagree. So.
Yeah, I know. And look, I mean, even without Peyton Manning his rookie year, he's still at 1,000 yards and 30 catches. So, I mean, he can do it without a great quarterback.
Sure.
So.
All right, who's next?
Great question. Jarvis Landry, receiver at LSU. This guy is interesting to me. I actually thought if you watch film on him and you watch him, he does a lot of things that would make you think he's slightly better than Odell Beckham coming out of the draft. And then you realize he's kind of limited in what he can do. But I would describe him as a Jason Avant on steroids. And I'm not saying I'm not saying he's taking illegal substances here, but he's somebody who has really, really good hands. Pretty big body, big frame, has no problem going across the middle, is going to make some catches that make you just drop your jaw sometimes. He can really catch the football. He's not fast. The disastrous pro day was just a day for him. That's what he does. He's not fast. He's not the quickest guy in the world, but he's big, and he catches everything, and a quarterback's going to love him. If he understands the playbook quickly and get on the field quickly, there aren't a lot of receiving options on that team. I think Charles Clay is decent. Mike Wallace, I think, will have a big bounce back year. Brian Hartline's a guy. That's fine. But I actually think he could take away a lot of the receptions you would get from a normal tight end set in that team. A lot of stuff over the middle, moving the chains. I think he's a good PPR option going forward in the next 2 to 3 years. Someone I'd have no problem drafting in the 5th to 7th round in our drafts this year. I actually think that highly of him.
Well, first, I don't think he's going to last that long, personally.
Maybe not.
I I think he could go as high as. I think he could go as well in IDP leagues like the one you and I are in. Probably third round is top end. Um, but I could see him going in the fifth round. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. There's not that many guys ahead of him in that receiving core. I mean, you've got Mike Wallace. He does one thing and one thing only. He just goes long. You've got Brian Hartline, who has performed admirably, I think, the last couple of years. But yeah, he's just a guy. So I think a guy like Landry could really surprise a lot of people, especially in the slot. I think if you stick him there, there's not as much pressure there as there is on the outside. And look, Tannehill, I think we agree Tannehill's an okay quarterback. He's not horrible.
Yeah.
It's going to come down to that offensive line. And if they can hold the line and give Tannehill time, I think good things could happen. So, whether that happens or not, we will see. But.
What you just said, I'm going to show my age a little bit, reminded me of Braveheart with Mel Gibson. Like, I can see Ryan Tannehill just getting the ball, and all he can think in his mind is just hold, like, don't break through, just given enough time to throw the football, and it never happens. Like, it just never happens.
Right.
Poor
I mean, the bottom line is honestly, this is a real make or break year for the franchise in general. Quite honestly, I mean, if they can't get it going this year, they're going to move on from Tannehill. I'm pretty sure they can move on from Mike Wallace and not be too hurt. So, yeah, this is a big year. So they're going to go all out, and I think that's probably a good thing for Landry. So.
Yep.
I think that might have covered the Dolphins as far as dynasty prospects go, right?
Yeah, poor Dolphins.
Yeah, that's too bad. It is a tough Friday for that whole town, so.
I know. Pour one out for Miami. They're going to have to go to the beach again tomorrow in 80-degree weather and cry into the ocean.
And watch Chris Bosh for the next 5 years. But that's okay.
Yeah, he's good.
Anyway. All right. Who do we got next?
The New York Jets, who are probably more interesting than they should be. I think they're more interesting from a name perspective than they are for actual production. But we'll go through that. We'll start with Mike Vick, who wanted to be there for a while. Apparently, he's been trying to get to New York for a few years. I sort of view him as a veteran version of Johnny Manziel, where I just kind of throw up my hands emoji style. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I know for one thing is for sure he's going to get hurt. Like, he's not going to play a full season. We know that at this point. He's injury prone. His body can't hold up. But while he's in the game, while he's on the field, this isn't a division full of world beaters on defense. And now he actually has some weapons, and we'll get to some of them later, but there are some people to throw the football to a little bit. The line's not awful. But I don't know, man. Like, if you're asking me to project good things from Mike Vick, not going to happen. Sorry.
Well, I think we first have to establish if he's even going to be the starter, because quite honestly, everything I've seen and read indicates Geno Smith is having a decent offseason. So, and look, he went into that situation knowing full well that he's going in as the backup. So, look, do I think there's still a chance he could eventually be the starter down the road? Yeah, maybe, but at the moment it's going to be Geno's show. So, look, I think Mike Vick is probably the higher end of backups in the NFL, but
yeah,
it's just a matter of how much more gas does he have left in the tank. I mean, look, when he was in his prime, he was very, very, very good. I mean, he was awesome. He single-handedly won me a couple fantasy leagues a couple years ago.
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's just, which is too bad because he's a very good player, but I think he's probably reached the end of the line. So
fair, and yeah, he's a high-end backup at this point. And if he does win you a few games this year, count your blessings, and then put someone back in once somebody comes back in the lineup. So, but still love the Michael Vick experience. Still love him, but he's kind of done. So, and moving on to a player that might also be done. We don't know. Chris Johnson. I say that with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, but I actually think he's got something to offer this team. I think it'll be in a limited capacity compared to what he's done in the past. They're not going to run this guy into the ground. At least I hope not. I actually think there's a second part of his career where he can do a ton of stuff out of the backfield. I think he's got good hands. I think he can be split out quite often, out of the backfield, etc. You got to worry about the knee. You have to worry about the declining returns, yard per carry, explosiveness. All the things that explain why Chris Johnson was awesome are starting to go away, and that's never a good sign. But this is an offense where if they're creative enough, I think they can get a little production out of him. And actually, he could be a really low-end running back 2 or a high-end 3 in some leagues if they use him correctly. I mean, Morningweg, for all the crap he gets as a head coach, he's been a pretty damn good coordinator. He knows how to use people correctly.
Yeah, and I think they're probably trying to emulate what they had a couple years ago when they had Sean Green, who was the between the tackles kind of running back, and paired him with Tomlinson, who they specifically used on passing downs and split him out wide and stuff like that. So, and look, it worked for a year for Tomlinson. I mean, he had a very good year passing or catching and rushing. So, and Johnson is younger than Tomlinson was at the time. And I think he's got a little more left to offer. And, yeah, it's going to be a matter of how they use him because he's not going to be a 3-down guy. That's not his role anymore. And Chris Ivory, the guy that is the between the tackles guy now, he's actually pretty good. I mean, I think he's pretty underrated, quite honestly. So, yeah, it's going to be a matter of how they use him. But especially if you're in a PPR league, if you've got him as your third running back or flex type guy, I think you could do a lot worse than Chris Johnson.
Yep, and the other thing, understand also, like, Chris Ivory's going to get goal line touches. Whether you agree or disagree with the idea of a goal line running back in general, it doesn't matter. Chris Ivory's going to get those touches in the goal line. So until proven otherwise, it's just going to happen. So something else to consider, too.
Right. And look, for dynasty purposes, Chris Johnson maybe has 2-3 years left as an effective running back. So you certainly shouldn't give up a whole lot for him. But look, he could probably be a pretty valuable guy off your bench. So
I think I consider him sort of like a house you flip on your market or on your neighborhood. If you can buy low, get a couple good games out of him, and sell high on him, that's what I would do. And I think it's entirely possible. He could come out and have a good 8 to 10 games, and then someone says, "Oh man, I need someone for the stretch run," and you can maybe get a first or a second out of somebody for that. So
yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that.
All right. So Chris Johnson, that's fine. Somebody I know for a fact, I have an absolute opinion, is Eric Decker. He's going to be awful. Go through the history of number 2 receivers in elite offenses, and when they leave and go somewhere else, what they do, it's ghastly, man. It's kind of shocking to watch the Alvin Harpers and J.J. Stokes of the world.
That's who I was thinking of. I'm not even kidding. I was about to say that. So
there's never an exception to the rule. There always, if you have a elite quarterback, scare quotes attached, of course, and a number 1 receiver, true number 1 on the other side, the number 2 receiver's numbers are always inflated. And you can look even to recent years if you want to go to like Brandon Stokely in the 04 Colts or Troy Brown had like 1,100 yards receiving with Tom Brady. Like, you don't go as a number 2 receiver who was a second-round pick, who was a good, not great guy at every level he's ever played at, and go be a number 1 in an offense that has been traditionally unimaginative and not good. If you have Eric Decker, listen, if somebody already has Eric Decker, okay, so that's their problem. What I'm saying is don't inherit it as your problem. Stay as far away from him as possible because they're going to want a high pick for him or more, and he's not going to be worth that at all. He's going to plummet down to earth.
Yeah, I think we might disagree a little bit. Look, I'm not saying he's going to be a wide receiver 1 or anything like that, but I think the situation, look at who are the receivers last year in New York? Can we honestly remember them?
Yeah, so Stephen Hill was one. Jeff Cumberland was a tight end. You had Kersey out of the slot, and Stantonio Holmes.
Okay, so I think personally he's already an upgrade on those guys. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay, and I think for everything I said about E.J. Manuel, I think the opposite of Geno, where I think he's on an upswing, quite honestly. So look, I'm not saying Decker's going to win you a championship or be your wide receiver one, but do I honestly think he could be a low end wide receiver two for a couple years? Yeah, I really do. And I realize that's high praise and that's being really optimistic, but I just think, that situation, he's going to be the number one guy. And I think he's got some skill there. I don't think it was a matter of, hey, he's some shorty who was just in the right place at the right time. But, so.
I guess, man. Like, even in his absolute best year, which was last year, you're talking about 1,300 yards and 11 TDs on 87 catches. Like, that's solid. That is wide receiver two territory. But that was playing with Peyton Manning in one of the greatest offenses in the history of football. Like, now he's going to Geno Smith and no other weapons around him. Like, good luck. I mean, good luck. He is a borderline wide receiver three, to me anyway.
And I think, yeah, on average, he'll be that. I think if he was your wide receiver three, I think you should be thrilled, quite honestly.
But I think you're living exactly where you should be living. He reminds me. Remember that year, like 2004 or 5, it was, where Drew Bennett went nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's Drew Bennett. Like, he had an awesome year. Good for him. Reality's gonna set in. Like, he's going to be facing, like, he faced number 3 corners last year because of Demaryius Thomas and Julius Thomas and Wes Welker. He was sometimes facing a 2 or 3 or a 4 on against every team. He never got doubled. There was never coverage rolled his way. Every week now, he will get the best guy with coverage rolled his way over the top. Yeah. Man, ugh.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun. That's all we know.
Yeah, and so a lot of this will also speak to the last guy in the Jets. God, 4 Jets to talk about. Good Lord. So Jace Amaro, and this is part of the reason I think Eric Decker may not be great in the first year anyway. Jace Amaro is the tight end they drafted out of Texas Tech. Prolific pass-catching tight end. I think his transition to the NFL is going to be a little harder for him than most people do. I think he's the starter day one, so don't get it twisted saying I hate him or anything. But you've already heard Morningwig come out and talk how he has a host of adjustments to make. He's got to basically go to square one to teach him about football because of what he did at Texas Tech. And he's not going to block because he can't. He's going to be the move tight end. He's going to move around and catch passes. But, man, he's going to have a lot to learn. And if he does it quickly, that'll be good, and it'll be good for everyone around him because he can develop quickly and actually help out the others around him. I just never like a lot of tight ends that have to learn that much on the fly in a new offense with new people all around them. I think he's the 3rd tight end in this draft as far as rookies. So, again, I'm not dogging the guy. He'll go in the 2nd or 3rd round in your drafts. But maybe not as high on him for the year one as everyone else is.
Yeah, and this is another case where we disagree. I personally think okay, let me back it up. Traditionally, rookie tight ends don't do well their first year. Okay, they just don't. And like you said, there's a lot of adjustments because it's not quite the same as a receiver learning different routes. I mean, you have to learn as a tight end. You gotta dive into more formations and coverage and all that kind of stuff. So, and let's face it, with Amaro, and I remember this because I did surprisingly watch some tape on him. He split out wide and just went straight. I mean, he pretty much they ran verticals every play, and look, he got some short linebacker that he could win the battle with, and he won. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of adjustment here, a lot of adjustment. But like you said, he's still going to be a starter. They do, in fairness, all the points you made about Decker getting the top coverage guy just means that Amaro is not going to get the top coverage guy.
Yes.
And I think with Geno, he's still progressing, but he's still going to need a safety valve in the middle of the field. So for me, he's actually my 2nd tight end rookie-wise. I have him ahead of Safarian Jenkins, but yeah, I think from day one he's going to be probably the 2nd or 3rd option on that team.
That's fair. I mean, we're still talking about the 2nd or 3rd option on an unimaginative, unproductive offense with 31st last year in passes attempted. So, I mean, kudos. That's awesome. I mean, even if they move up to like 20th in passes attempted next year, which they won't because Rob Ryan's their coach, but then you're talking about 25 balls to 35 balls thrown his way next year. So he's one for the future. I agree. I'm not. He has a chance to be pretty good. It's just going to be a long transition for him. So he's someone that don't draft him thinking you're going to start him from day one, even though he's going to be a starter from day one.
Okay, so let's play this game.
Yeah.
How early would you draft him then?
Well, so for our league, it'll be a second-round draft pick, no questions asked, because tight ends are just held to a premium. In other leagues, third round probably. And I have him behind Safarius Jenkins. I think once they get so the thing about Jenkins is he played 20 pounds heavier last year than he was supposed to. They bulked him up. They wanted to have him more inline blocking. It didn't fit him. It took away everything that was special about him, which was he was a freak athlete. They've already got him down about 12 pounds at training camp at Tampa. They're going to get him back to his playing weight when he's a sophomore, and I think you're going to see that incredible rare athlete again. And I think he'll be better. I just do. And with that being said, like I don't know. Like the ceiling for me of a guy like Amaro is somebody like a Brent Selleck, who is a very good tight end. There's nothing wrong with him. He's good over the middle, dependable, great hands, pretty good athlete. But there's just nothing special about him either. And if you look at Amaro, it's kind of the same thing, man. Like he's got good hands as much as we can see. It's hard to tell because, like you said, he was never in a matchup where it was athlete against athlete, one-on-one, where he had to break someone down. It was always, all right, I got this 5'8" undrafted future non-NFL prospect. Just run a 9 route and go get open. So, but he's got decent size too. He's not particularly fast. He's not particularly quick. He's not a great blocker. Like he's just got so much to improve to reach the potential of. Like someone threw out the comparison to Jason Witten to me the other day, and I just kind of laughed that off. Like Jason Witten's his route running ability and his quickness for someone his size it's unparalleled. And Amaro doesn't have.
Jason Witten is a big dude. I mean, not just height. I mean, he's a big guy. So.
But that's what makes his quickness in and out of breaks and in and out of routes so rare. Amaro doesn't have.
I agree. Believe me, I'm still a Witten fan. I mean, I could probably do a whole podcast on Jason Witten. I think he's pretty good. So, but yeah, I think with Amaro, I think our expectations have probably been reeled in. You know. For me personally, you mentioned before our league is 1.5 PPR for tight ends. I would have no problem taking him in the late first, quite honestly, just because of the nature of what tight ends are worth. So now at a
gamble somewhere, you gamble on tight ends. I get that.
Sure. And if it's a standard PPR league or just a standard league period, yeah, I would agree with the second to third round assessment for him. I would.
Yeah.
So.
Man, that's more than Jets than I ever wanted to spend on. Jeez.
It's a lot of Jets talk. It's a lot of Jets talk.
But they finally drafted offensive players worth a damn, so good for them. So now we have something to talk about.
And they went kind of nuts with it. So good for them.
So last on the list, everyone's favorite team to hate, the New England Patriots. And we'll start off with the most interesting one of all of them because no one really has any idea why they drafted him where they did. But Jimmy Garoppolo. So there was a huge amount of hype pre-draft to him going in the into the first, second, Tony Romo comparisons, all this stuff, and that's awesome. He got drafted in the fourth round in the longest round, I think is what it was, fourth or fifth.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be the third quarterback. I think they drafted him in mind with a replacement to Ryan Mallett, not to Tom Brady. I don't know that this guy has the skill set to be a starter in the NFL. One of the quickest releases I've ever seen, but it kind of reminds me of like an Uncle Rico quick release. Like it's amazing that the ball even goes anywhere. Or like a Vince Young quick release is a better idea, only not quite as.
Ooh.
I mean, not quite as pronounced.
Oh.
It's just the release. The release is unnecessarily quick to me, and it takes away from a lot of fundamentals that he should be working on. He could drive the ball further downfield if he wasn't so concerned. It didn't have such a quick release. He's the anti-Byron Leftwich, basically. I don't know that he's draftable. He's going to get drafted in some leagues, and that's fine. I don't know that he's draftable because I don't think he's ever the starter in New England. Even if Brady goes down, Mallett's coming in. If Mallett goes down, they're probably going to sign a veteran off the street because this guy played at Eastern Illinois. Like, he's never seen the field. So he's an interesting guy. Keep tabs on him throughout the year, though.
Right. yeah, again, it goes back to what I've said before, which is anytime a quarterback's drafted, people freak out for whatever reason. So, yeah, and I agree. I agree. I don't. Mallet has 1 year left. They're probably thinking, look, we really don't want to have to re-sign him. We need to get someone else in here before he goes. So that's what they did. And I certainly don't think they drafted him with the expectation of taking over for Brady or anything like that. So,
Agreed.
yeah, I think, if you have a taxi squad or just a super deep roster, or hey, if you've got Tom Brady, it's not a bad pick, but certainly don't waste, the later round pick, anything sooner than a later round pick on it.
Yep.
Like you said, he went to a small school. They ran a pro style offense, but it was pretty quick, meaning, like you said, they had to get the ball out pretty quickly. But
Yeah.
look, he is still he's a part of the Derek Carr school of just freak out mode where he just can't stay in the pocket, and he can't handle pressure. And look, in the NFL, you're gonna have to deal with it. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that, like you said, he had a lot of hype before the draft, and I think that hype only compounded with where he was drafted. But at the end of the day, look, it's going to be Tom Brady for the next 5 years probably.
Yeah. I agree. Well, that's a bit long. Maybe 42 then. But yeah, in this, I don't think this guy.
Right, right. All right, who's next?
Brandon LaFell, and I'm going to rat you out a little bit. The notes you put in here for yourself was just meh.
Oh, I can tell you the notes. Meh.
Yeah, I was just saying meh. So here's the thing. If the coaching staff in New England are driven crazy by the fumbles of Stephen Ridley, just wait till they get a load of the drops by Brandon LaFell. It's kind of insane how bad his hands are on simple patterns. And I watched more of him than I needed to because I'm a Cam Newton owner. And I actually owned LaFell at some point because I was decimated by injuries at receiver. But, the guy is still pretty good athletically. He can get open. He's good in the run game. He can block well. He's a good teammate. He's not... he's good. He's everything good about a receiver until he has to catch the football, and then it becomes a struggle. And if they fix that with him, I actually think he could do really well in this offense. I've just never seen a receiver this far in his career be able to fix that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's really not much else to say. I mean, I think they brought him in for some depth. Let's face it, the wide receivers of New England is it's pretty shallow on depth. I mean, they've got Aaron Dobson, I guess, who has some potential. They've got, obviously, Edelman and Amendola, who sound and look and feel like the same player. And then they've got a couple guys who I think they are hoping to hit home runs on, like in Tompkins. So I think they probably brought him in just as a backup in case one of those young guys like Tompkins or Dobson fell on their face.
Yeah.
I heard some rumblings before about converting him to maybe tight end, only because he's a big guy. It's not like he's a lean guy. And, I think we saw the New England offense worked very well with two tight end sets. So, look, if that happens, great. I think he probably has some value as a tight end, but as a receiver, I don't know that he's even going to be the fourth option on that team.
Maybe not. There are some rumors also about them trying to trade Amendola right now also, so keep an eye out for that. If they do end up...
Which for me, as an Edelman owner, would be fantastic. So I'm all for it. For it.
Yeah, I mean... look, Brandon LaFell, the first contact he had with the media after training camp in July, the very first thing he said is, yeah, my head's spinning, because he just couldn't grasp what was going on around him. I don't know. I hope the guy does well. From what I can understand, everything I know of him, he seems like a very nice guy, good kid, worked hard, etc. Everyone at Carolina liked him. Cam Newton went to bat for him to try to re-sign him and still didn't make it happen. So he seems... I hope he does well, but I just don't know.
And I think he'll fit into the whole Patriot way BS, but
because
for your dynasty,
talent, you have to fall in. Like, that's not a Patriot way
Well,
thing. If
yeah.
you're not good, you better damn well do what your boss tells you to do.
Well, yeah, pretty much. So, look, I
Ridiculous.
think for Dynasty redraft, all of the above, you could probably safely pass on LaFell. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have them,
Okay,
drop them.
very good. Yeah, yeah, create that roster space.
Patriot way.
Right.
Your quarterback married a supermodel and built a house with a moat around it. Talk to me about the Patriot way.
Yeah, he did.
He
Yeah, he
does.
did. Don't forget it.
No one ever will. It's a moat. It's a goddamn moat.
Fair enough. All right, who's left?
Uh, so finally, and my notes to this were just meh again. But Darrelle Revis, this is a guy that's going to have a much bigger impact in reality than in fantasy. There's just no way around it. People aren't going to throw his way. He's not going to return punts. He doesn't tackle in the run game because they're not going to ask him to, even though he can. Um, you know, it's he's Darrelle Revis. He's awesome at his job, even if his body is falling apart. He's still going to be awesome at his job. And no one, Geno Smith and EJ Manuel might throw at him, but I mean, he'll be fine. He's worth drafting whenever you start to see a run on cornerbacks or defensive backs in your league, and safeties are already gone. At that point, sure, he could be depth filler, but I would never draft any cornerback unless they're like a very, very skilled punt returner.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So I definitely would not advocate drafting him as your DB2 or anything where you have to start him necessarily on a weekly basis anyway.
Mhm.
I think his value is if you've got two starters in for your DBs. Look, I don't have a problem drafting a guy like that who is very, very good at the position. I mean, I've been a Richard Sherman dynasty owner the last couple of years, and that's worked out pretty well. I mean, now given you could argue, like you said, going forward, they're just not going to throw to him. But at the end of the day, I think he's just too talented that on the rare occasion that somebody makes a mistake and does throw his way, he's going to make him pay for it. So, if you're in a league, a big play league that has points for interceptions and return yards and touchdowns, then I think Revis is a fine third option amongst your DBs. But if you're more a tackle IDP league, then yeah, I would safely pass on Revis for sure.
Agreed. Agreed. It'll be fun to watch him get you if you enjoy football at a tactical level, though. It'll be fun to watch how he gets used and how he affects everyone else on defense because he's going to affect that team in a positive way. He's going to free up people on defense to do for those splash plays, for those spectacular plays. So I don't know who they are. I don't know who they're going to be yet. I don't know if the Patriots know who they're going to be yet, but other people are going to have a chance to make plays on that team because he's there.
Yeah, and I think just as a quick side note, they're another team who, given they're always very good, but the defense especially, I think, can be a sleeper type unit. I mean, you had a lot of guys hurt last year. You had Will Fork hurt last year. You had Gerard Mayo hurt last year. So to get both of those guys back, you add Revis. You've got Chandler Jones, who's becoming quickly one of the top defensive linemen in the league. And they signed Brandon Browner too, who given he's not going to play the first part of the season, but they're going to have him for most of the season. So I think that defense, quite honestly, has the potential to be very good. So whether it's Revis or someone else on that defense in an IDP format, I think is going to do pretty well.
Agreed. And that's your podcast, people. There's no one else in the league to go over. No one else matters.
We covered. I was gonna say that's everyone. Like,
Yeah.
don't even worry about other people. We covered everyone.
If somebody brings up somebody we didn't talk about, just punch them in the face and walk away because they're talking about people that don't matter.
Probably not. Probably not. And hey, if you want to catch up, and you have an 8-hour drive tomorrow, like Mr. Jonathan does, then feel free to download every division podcast, and you can recap on all of that.
It's not a bad way to spend a trip, man. Just saying.
I was going to say, you're going to probably do that. You're probably going to want to hear our voices or my voice again. I get it. I get it.
Hey, practice makes perfect. You play to win the game. All that bullshit.
There you go. There you go. Right. All right, so yeah, that concludes this episode. Also concludes our look at the divisions around the NFL in terms of new dynasty faces. Next time, I think we'll probably start looking at some rookies and maybe some mock drafts and switch it up a little bit. But in the meantime, you can always check us out at dynastyfantasyfootballcentral.com or tweet us at dynasty_FFC. Jonathan, anything else before we sign off this evening?
No, we're just getting so close to actual football. It's exciting. Training camp's coming. Things will be more crystallized. We'll probably go over some of this later and sort of clarify where we think people should be exactly. Keep an eye out. We'll start having some of our tiers out there, too, so you know exactly where people should fall within their drafts. All of that's coming. We're getting to the fun part of the year, people, so just hang in. I promise the World Cup's over soon. We'll get to real football.
LeBron knows where he's going, so we can all move on. So
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Until next time, everybody.